Now, here's Ed Bernstein.
Well, come November, we have a couple decisions to make, not only about candidates, but also about questions. And the very first question that you'll be asked to vote about is question number 1. And it's a question that fills a loophole for background checks for gun ownership. And with me to talk about that is Jan Jones Blackhurst and Jennifer Crowe. Is there a name on question 1, a title, an exact title? Or
question 1 is called the Background Check Initiative.
The Background Check Initiative. Now, I think in order to clarify what this is, we need to do a little bit of background. Right now, if somebody wants to purchase a handgun, you would go to a gun dealer, right, a gun store in Las Vegas, and they would do a background check.
Correct.
Right?
That's a federal law.
Right, it's federal law. And it would take, a relatively quick period of time. And if the person is not a felon, I guess there's some exclusions in that law.
Felon, domestic abuser, severe mentally ill, documented problems.
Okay. So, I mean, they're going to look at that, and if there's a record of mental illness, and I guess there's a process where you can appeal it if you're denied it, et cetera. But at the same time, if you can't get a gun that way, you can get it. You can go down to your Cashman Field when they have these gun shows, or one of the casinos that have the gun shows, or you can go online, even worse, I would think, right, and purchase a gun with no background check.
Correct. It's a loophole that's in the law because it wasn't clear that a registered gun dealer requires a background check in order to complete the sale of a firearm.
This would be like being able to go online and obtain a driver's license from another state.
Sort of,
right, without any kind of testing, right?
Without any kind of testing and not even sure whether you had insurance.
Right. So this is what they call the loophole, filling up the loophole, getting rid of the loophole. Now, you would think that everybody would be in favor, because when you hear the politicians speak, they all talk about, hey, let's do something about the mental ill people, let's do something about the felons, let's do something about the domestic abusers. But when it comes time to vote, they don't vote for it, right?
So far in Nevada, it's very interesting. The polling shows that far and away Nevadans support background checks. Far and away gun owners in Nevada support background checks because they realize this isn't taking away anyone's right to purchase a firearm. And I think Jennifer and I both agree we support the Second Amendment. But everyone, if you're going to buy a gun, should have no problem with having a background check. And they found, people say, oh, well, it won't stop it. In Nevada, with background checks, over 5,000 gun sales were stopped to people who shouldn't own guns, felons, domestic abusers.
But those 5,000, Jan, can go on the internet.
That's correct.
Or go into a gun show and have a field day. Buy as many weapons as they want.
Yes.
And that's really what we're trying to fix. To give a little context, background checks have been federal law since 1998, and they've been required of licensed gun dealers during all this time. But we now have sort of this new dynamic of this online marketplace, these websites you can go to and connect with another local a gun seller, private seller, to meet in a parking lot at your local McDonald's and buy a gun without a background check. That's a growing piece of the market, and it really doesn't make sense to most voters, and that's why we have such support for this, to have this inconsistency in the law. The goal with question 1 is to level the playing field and make sure that the requirements are the same whether you're going through a gun dealer or at a gun show. You know, you mentioned the gun shows. A lot of licensed dealers sell guns at gun shows, so background checks are required at that booth. But
so they walk into that booth and they have to do a background check. And they walk next door to somebody else's booth and they're not complying with the law, no background check. So if I own a gun shop in Las Vegas, wouldn't I be in favor of other people? I mean, I have an investment in my business. I'm paying taxes, I'm paying rent, I'm paying insurances.
And I'm abiding by the law.
Right. Aren't most of them also in favor of this?
Well, nationally, the polling shows a majority of gun store owners do support background checks because it does level the playing field. It does sort of put everybody on the same standard.
Right.
And the way this law would work for these private sales, you would go to your local gun store to conduct the check. So in some ways, this is a good thing for those businesses. It's going to bring more people into their stores. You know, if you're buying a gun from a private seller, you might want ammunition or other accessories to go with it, and you're at the store, then you can buy them.
What percentage of weapons in the United States, if you know, are purchased from gun shows compared to gun shops?
I don't know
know
that we
the
have that
answer to that.
statistic, but we do know that about 40% of the market is these private sales, whether it's online or these gun show sales as well.
Now, you have a lot of exceptions built into question one. So if somebody votes yes for question one, you're asking them to support leveling that playing field and having background checks for people who are mentally ill, felons, domestic abusers. That would be a yes vote. Included in that yes vote, there's certain exceptions. Like if my dad wanted to pass down a weapon to me, then I would not be required to have a background check,
That's
right?
correct. If you sell to a family member, you're not required.
Right.
I think there's some language where for hunters you can loan guns.
Yeah, you can loan guns on the hunting range or at the target range. And a lot of these exceptions that you mentioned were to deal with the issues that Governor Sandoval raised in his veto of this original legislation in 2013.
Which actually passed the legislature.
We never had an actual vote on this before?
What
we did
happened
have-
was it passed the legislature,
Right.
and Governor Sandoval vetoed the legislation because he had some concerns about the language. We addressed the concerns and then put it on a ballot initiative.
And the ballot initiative that we have, has this been going on in other states as well?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's been successful, or?
18 states have now passed background checks. I think the most recent was Oregon and Washington.
Sure, there are the 18 states. Some of them have done it legislatively, like we did in 2013. Unfortunately, with the governor's veto, we kind of had to come back again. So, to your point, this is the first time voters will have the chance to vote on this.
But what's interesting, in states that have passed it, you've seen significant reductions in both police murders, suicides, and death of by domestic abusers, almost 50%.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. We have, 48% fewer law enforcement officers killed with handguns. 46% fewer women murdered by their intimate partners with guns. As you said, it's almost half. In fact, these are so consistent. 48% fewer gun suicides, and 48% less gun trafficking. So everyone, it's almost 50% all across the board with all those elements. Now, obviously, it's not going to stop every horrible crime, every mass shooting, but if it stops one, why is it not worth it?
And it doesn't, it's no problem. A background check takes, 10 minutes, if that?
Most of them are completed within a few minutes.
They're online. I mean, you can. I go into a gun store. It'll be online. It can.
No, you fill out a
minute or
form,
two.
and then
Yeah.
they dial the phone number.
Right.
Okay. So why is it? Okay. Now you hear politically all the time that when you have an initiative like this, the response is, "Hey, they're trying to take away our Second Amendment rights."
Right. That is just obfuscating the truth. Nobody's trying to take away anybody's Second Amendment rights. Everybody has a right to buy a gun. But people that are felons, domestic abusers, and mentally ill, I don't think they should have guns. And if the statistics show that you get the right result when you protect that, why wouldn't any responsible Nevadan want to support background checks?
Hey, we've taken away felons' right to vote.
Yeah. But we're not
Right?
going to
Nobody's
take away
complaining
their gun?
about that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and to Jan's point, this is just enforcing the laws that are already on the books. Felons, domestic abusers, and when we talk about the severely mentally ill, those are folks who have been determined by a court to be a
Right.
danger.
And I think that's where you see the reduction in suicides. That they don't want a gun because they're a danger mostly to themselves.
So when you put this new language in, is the governor now supportive?
No. And, you know, I have great respect for Governor Sandoval, and I'm frankly sort of surprised because we thought, fix the exceptions that were his concern, but...
So now he became one of those, hey, you're taking away my Second Amendment rights? That's the fallback?
Well, you know, there wasn't really a clear statement from him that we heard about what his specific objections to the language is, because his objections before related to the family transfers and the penalties. It's a first offense is no longer a felony, it's a misdemeanor. So we really listened to those concerns in an attempt to really sort of have something that represented the broad viewpoints of everybody at the table on this one. So it is disappointing where the governor landed, and we're not clear on what his objections still are. There was some mention that this doesn't keep guns out of the hands of criminals, but the statistics that you mentioned and other statistics that we cite, it does.
You know, and that argument I just find...
It's an all or nothing argument.
It's incredible. Right? You know, if it keeps guns out of the hands of one criminal, then it's good. It doesn't hurt anybody. Right. It doesn't keep anyone from purchasing a gun.
Oh, what do they say? The good is the enemy of the perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
You can't have it to be good unless it's perfect. What's amazing to me is if I were a police officer, I would be so supportive of background checks for people to have guns, because I wouldn't want somebody out on the street who has a mental illness problem or a felon or somebody who's been...
Even if you walk into the middle of a domestic abuse call,
right,
and someone has a gun.
But I'm learning not all police officers are in favor of this. It seems like it's contrary to their own best interests.
Yeah, unfortunately, some of the rural sheriffs have come out in opposition to question one, but we do have significant support from some of the larger law enforcement groups in Nevada.
I don't like to be cynical, but, you know, sheriffs in Nevada are elected. So...
That means campaign contributions.
That means campaign contributions. That means support by the NRA. That means, you know, support of those who believe this is a Second Amendment issue. But if you look at the rank and file, the police officers themselves, most of those large police organizations have come out in favor of background checks.
So how they're really going to vote, we don't we don't know. But it seems like what has happened in this country is that. And it seems that people who have been supportive of these modified issues that you're trying to pass get opposition in the primaries that are well funded by the NRA. So in other words, if somebody is supportive of a background check for guns, and they're a Republican, typically a Republican congressman, let's say hypothetically, then the NRA will financially support an opponent in a primary against them, and they're afraid.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's some of what we're seeing in where people are falling on this issue.
Exactly.
And it's unfortunate. It's not a political issue. It's not a partisan issue. This is about public safety, and that's all that it's about. And these attempts to kind of muddy the waters with these other issues and scare tactics is unfortunate. You know, it's not the facts, and I think it does a disservice to voters who by and large support what we're trying to do, because nobody wants to see somebody die at the hands of somebody who shouldn't have a gun.
And nationally, when they do national polls on this, it's like 80-some percent.
Yeah, it's even higher.
Of people support this.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those common sense no-brainers. Right. You know, if this is the law in the gun stores, why isn't it the law everywhere?
And also, how can you watch what's happening all over the country? And I'm not saying, to your point, it's not going to stop a crazy person from using a gun inappropriately. But if it stops one person, why wouldn't you want to take this small extra precaution?
So is the NRA putting a lot of money, or putting money into against this measure passing in November?
Yes, they are.
So have they started running commercials yet, or?
Not on television. They've done some digital advertising. They have a website, and they just last week opened offices in Las Vegas and Reno. We've been on the ground for months. Year.
We've seen them begin to hold television space, so we assume they'll also be doing paid media.
And it's essentially so it gets financed by the NRA and their tentacles and
Correct.
the people that they reach, huh?
Yes.
So what is your biggest task here? Is it to educate people on what this question one really means?
Exactly. The biggest task is getting away from all of the rhetoric, the Second Amendment, all of which this is not about, and make sure that people understand this is already the law. There is a loophole that is a result of the big growth in gun shows and internet sales that we'd like to close so that everybody's held to the same standard that gun dealers, registered gun dealers, have been held to since 1998.
And this would not have been necessary had the Congress fixed that loophole, because they did the law, right, saying, hey, you need background checks at a gun store.
Exactly.
But you can't get Congress to react because of the politics of this.
Correct.
So you have to go right directly to the people.
And that's why the 18 states have acted the way that they have since Congress failed to act after Sandy Hook, which was when the legislation came up. People were frustrated. This is a simple thing that won't fix the whole problem, but it can make a difference. And like to Jan's point, why wouldn't we want to do that? So that's why states like ours have acted. We collected over 250,000 signatures in the signature gathering process to qualify the petition, the most ever in Nevada history.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this always comes down to that basic question. So when we elect a congressman or senator, who are they representing? Are they representing the will of the people, or are they representing a special interest that's giving them campaign dollars? Right? I mean, this is what it, and let's take a look at some of the people that are running. Like, if Hillary Clinton is, I assume, on one side and Donald Trump's on the other side of this issue.
Has Trump ever taken a position on this issue?
I'm not familiar with his position
don't
on
know
background
either.
checks. In terms of gun violence prevention, clearly there are two different sides. But I think with things like background checks, one of the things we see is this is an area where people can agree, even if you're on polar opposites. For those races at the top of the ticket that seem to be grabbing everyone's attention. This is something on the ballot that a majority of people can support because it isn't about partisanship. It's just about making our state safer.
But obviously some of the politicians are not supporting it, and a lot of them because they can't get anything passed.
Right.
Right, because we have the gridlock galore with this issue and so many more.
But unfortunately, the NRA has proved itself very effective at hurting those who oppose them.
And why, I mean, when you really flush through this, is it because they don't want to even open a door this much that, any kind of law prohibiting any kind of use of a weapon?
I think if you really dig down into the NRA, and I'm going to get a little political here, but I can't, you'll find that their membership isn't nearly as broad as you think. They have a lot of money, and most of that money comes from gun manufacturers, not gun owners. This is not a grassroots organization. This is an organization that's very well funded and protects their main constituents, which is gun manufacturers.
And the gun manufacturers feel that they wouldn't be able to sell enough guns to just people who are should be getting the guns. People who have clean records, people who have passed background checks. That's not good enough for them. They want to be able to sell guns to people who cannot pass background checks. And it's all about the dollars.
It's pretty surprising.
Yeah. Is there a difference in price when you purchase a gun from a gun store? When you go into those gun shows and you go into the person who does the background check compared to somebody next door who doesn't, is there a difference?
It's pretty minimal. When you buy a gun from a licensed gun dealer, you pay a $25 fee for a background check currently. The initiative doesn't set the fee for these private sale checks. It's really going to be up to the market. And in other states, we've seen it be about $15 to $20. So it's not significant.
But it encourages people not to go around a different path instead of having to pay it.
I think most people want to follow the law. And I think people who sell guns don't want to sell them to a felon if you're selling it privately. But there's really no way of knowing whether or not you're doing that without a background check. This in some way, not in some ways, in all ways, protects gun sellers, whether you're licensed or not. in making sure that you're not putting a gun into the hands of somebody who is prohibited by our current laws from having it. That's a real important thing. I think there's a fear that we're trying to stop people from getting guns or put some sort of restrictions on people's access. That's not what it's about. It's about making sure that the existing laws are enforced.
Yeah, I just think it's crazy that we have laws that say if you're a felon, you cannot vote, but you can go purchase a gun. I mean, it's just nonsensical to me. And let's be clear, this has nothing to do with assault weapons, has nothing to do with automatic weapons, has nothing to do with how many loads are in a clip.
No.
Right? It's just strictly background check for people who have committed felonies, domestic abusers, and
Yeah, and it's in our name. We're Nevadans for background checks. That's what we're working on. That's the focus of this campaign, and it's the only thing that this ballot measure would do. It's not some far-reaching infringement that the opposition would like to paint it as.
Does Nevada sell more guns per capita than other states, or are we?
I don't have those statistics.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems that there's...
We clearly have a gun-owning culture in our state. I live in the north primarily, and there's a significant history and tradition of gun ownership and outdoor sportsmanship, hunting, and all those kinds of things. So, I mean, clearly it's an important part of identity for a lot of Nevadans, which is why we've worked so hard to strike this balance between public safety and Second Amendment rights.
And how will we go about educating people on this question?
Well, it's like any law, there's going to be lots of press coverage, as we've seen already. And a lot of outreach, education. It's a lot like, when seatbelt laws were passed long time ago, there was a lot of controversy there, and there was a learning curve in educating the public and enforcing those laws. But now it's an accepted standard of behavior, and we save, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives because of seatbelts.
It's interesting. I have a residence both here and in South Carolina. In South Carolina, the helmet law is seen as a...
For a motorcycle.
First
you want to ride a motorcycle?
You want to ride a motorcycle.
We used to have that in Nevada.
We used to have it in Nevada.
Yeah.
And we imposed a helmet law because you wanted to keep people safe, not because you wanted to take away their rights. It's sort of the same thing. You're just trying to keep people who shouldn't have guns from having guns. And everybody who should...
It's keeping the rest of us safe.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the helmet...
The helmet, that's your,
that's your, you want to, we'll go head first
helmet?
into a Paul. Yeah. Although, as a taxpayer, we ended up footing the medical bills for those people.
It's interesting. There's a medical cost, a taxpayer cost to this as well. They figured the cost of gun shootings that are a result of people who had guns who shouldn't have guns in Nevada hospitals was almost $40 million.
For 2014, Nevada hospitals were charged over $40 million for firearm injuries, and half of that's borne by taxpayers through public programs and charities. So, I mean, we're already paying the price, whether it's, the hospital costs or the business costs or, the human costs, all these families, dealing with the death of a loved one that wasn't, could have been prevented if that person had been stopped from getting a gun they weren't supposed to have.
A company like Walmart that sells guns, this doesn't affect them at all.
Nope, they already do background checks.
Right. So, I mean,
some of the goods, they do background checks.
Some of the largest retail stores are already compliant.
Cabela's, yep, of course.
And but if you drive around town, you see the billboards for the gun shows, and I've been to them. I mean, they're very well attended, and it's look. There's been some incidents at some of these gun shows with guns going off, and
I think it's interesting, Jennifer's point, that if you're a registered gun dealer at these gun shows, they're doing background checks. So you can go from one booth and have a background check because that dealer's complying with the law, and go to the next one and not because he's choosing not to comply.
Right, and this has nothing, doesn't put any kind of age requirement on, that already exists,
It doesn't
right?
change who can own a gun. All it does is close the loophole to require the background check.
And when you look at some of the supporters of this, because there is a list, and I mean, these are all the leaders, essentially, in Nevada. I mean, it's just amazing how many people are supporting it, and when we look on the other side, it's really just a special interest.
We have broad bipartisan support, as you mentioned. You know, we have huge support from the gaming industry, the biggest industry in our state. You know, not just Jan, but others who have joined our effort as well, both financially contributing to our campaign and lending their name to our advisory board. I doubt that any of us, and we've all been in politics here in Nevada a long time, have ever seen a list like this supporting an issue.
People from all walks of life. What is the law in a casino bringing a gun into a casino?
I don't know the answer to that. I think the concealed weapon law in Nevada would take precedent. That if you have a license to carry a concealed weapon, then you have the right to bring it into a casino as well. And I know we don't, you know, you don't do any screening or you have to walk through a metal detector.
Well, you know, but typically when you have all the casinos and all these significant individuals supporting something, normally it's a done deal, it passes. You know, you get everybody on board. But here it's not such a sure thing.
Right. It depends on how much money comes in to really distort what background checks is truly about.
Okay.
And that's part of the reason we've been working on this on the ground for so long. We've had, you know, hundreds of volunteers contact thousands of voters since January when our field program began to really educate people, let them know it's on the ballot, let them know what it is and what it isn't, so that they can, you know, be informed and vote for public safety and vote yes on
So
one.
let me reiterate this one more time, Jennifer. Jan. No, we're not trying to take away anybody's Second Amendment rights.
Never.
Correct.
No, we're not trying to ban assault weapons. No, we're not trying to limit the number of loads in a clip. Yes, we are trying to stop felons from having guns. Yes, we are trying to stop people who have been certified as having mental illness from purchasing guns. Yes, we're trying to stop domestic abusers from purchasing guns. And yes, we know this is not a cure-all for everything that ails us in this area, but it will save a few lives, so why not?
Yes.
That's
Is that it?
perfectly
Yes.
stated.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, you need to vote yes on question 1. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for
Ed.
having us.
If you've been hurt in an accident, turn to someone you can trust. Enough said. Call Ed.
I'm Ed Bernstein, and I've been helping you and your neighbors for almost 40 years.